Lily Ashford adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist, borrowed from the auction house she'd spent 3 years building into Manhattan's most exclusive, and scanned the crowd with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to read power in posture alone. Senators mingled with tech moguls. Oil money traded jokes with old European titles. And somewhere in this glittering ecosystem of wealth and influence, her newest consignment sat locked in a climate-controlled case, a 19th century Fabergé egg valued at $18 million. Her phone buzzed. Buyer confirmed for Lot 7. He's here, third balcony, east side. Lily's pulse quickened, not with anxiety, but with the sharp satisfaction of a deal about to close. She'd spent 6 months authenticating that piece, another 4 building the provenance narrative that made it irresistible. Tonight, it would sell, and her commission would finally let her stop renting office space and buy the building outright. She moved through the crowd with the kind of grace that came from years of charity galas and museum openings, her black silk gown catching light like oil on water. Conversations paused as she passed. She'd learned not to mistake that attention for admiration. It was assessment. In this world, everyone was calculating everyone else's net worth, their leverage, their usefulness. The third balcony was quieter, darker. The kind of space where deals happened in low voices, where handshakes meant more than contracts. A single figure stood at the railing, looking down at the ballroom below. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of build that suggested discipline rather than vanity. His tuxedo was impeccable, Italian, tailored so precisely it seemed like a second skin. Dark hair swept back from a face that was all clean lines and sharp angles, the kind of bone structure that would photograph well, but felt almost brutal in person. He didn't turn when she approached. "Mr. Volkov?" she asked, keeping her voice low, professional. "No." The single word hit like a door closing. His voice was deep, controlled, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Something European, softened by years elsewhere. Lily hesitated. "I was told the buyer for Lot 7 would be here." He was. The man finally turned, and Lily felt the floor shift beneath her heels. His eyes were dark. Not brown, but something deeper, colder. The kind of eyes that had seen things she'd only read about in headlines. A scar traced a thin line along his jaw, barely visible unless you were standing this close. And he was looking at her, the way a strategist looked at a chessboard. "Then who are—" "Someone who doesn't like last-minute changes," he interrupted smoothly. "Volkov won't be attending tonight. Family matter. I'm here to assess whether his interests are still aligned." Lily's mind raced. Volkov had been pre-approved, vetted, cleared by her team. Losing him now meant the Fabergé egg went back into storage. And her commission evaporated. "I can arrange a private viewing," she said quickly. "Tomorrow morning, if that suits your schedule." The corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile. "You assume I'm here for the egg? Aren't you?" He stepped closer, and Lily caught the faint scent of cedar and something else, something darker. Leather. Smoke. The kind of cologne that cost more than her monthly rent. "I'm here," he said quietly, "because someone told me the woman who authenticated that piece spent 2 weeks in a St. Petersburg archive, cross-referencing imperial records that were supposed to have been destroyed in 1917. Lily's breath caught. That information wasn't public. She'd kept her research methods deliberately vague in the catalog notes. Revealing her sources would have invited competitors to replicate her process. "Who told you that? Does it matter?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her face like he was memorizing it. "You're very good at what you do, Miss Ashford, which makes me wonder what else you're good at." It should have sounded like a threat, or a proposition. Instead, it felt like a test. "I authenticate high-value art. Lily said evenly. I don't answer questions about my methodology at cocktail parties. Not a cocktail party. He gestured to the balcony, the shadowed alcove, the empty space between them and the rest of the world. And I'm not asking about your methodology. Then what are you asking? He looked at her for a long moment, long enough that Lily became aware of her own heartbeat, the way her dress suddenly felt too tight across her ribs. Whether you can be trusted. The words landed with the weight of something far more serious than art dealing. Trusted with what? With knowing when to walk away. Lily's instincts screamed at her to do exactly that. This man radiated danger the way the chandeliers radiated light. Constant, undeniable, beautiful in its intensity. But she'd built her career on calculated risks, on reading situations other people missed. I don't walk away from opportunities, she said. Even when they're dangerous? Especially then. His expression shifted, something like approval flickering across his features. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim card. No name, just a phone number embossed in silver ink. Call me tomorrow, he said. Not about the egg. About what then? He leaned in, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, and lowered his voice to barely more than a whisper. About whether you're ready to stop playing in the shallow end. Then he was gone, moving through the shadows with the kind of fluidity that suggested military training, or something worse. Lily stood frozen, the card burning in her palm, her mind spinning through a dozen interpretations of what had just happened. By the time she returned to the ballroom, her hands had stopped shaking. By the time she got home, she'd memorized the number. By 3 a.m, she'd convinced herself not to call. By sunrise, she was dialing. He answered on the first ring. I'm surprised. That same low voice, rougher now, like he'd just woken up. I expected you to wait at least 24 hours. Lily stood at her apartment window, watching early morning light spill across the Manhattan skyline. She'd rehearsed this conversation 3 times, but now that he was on the line, her prepared script felt hollow. You said it wasn't about the egg. It's not. Then what is it about? Silence. Long enough that Lily wondered if the call had dropped. Then, there's a painting. Private collection. The owner wants to sell, but he can't do it through traditional channels. Why not? Because it was stolen. 70 years ago, during the war. The family it belongs to thinks it was destroyed. Lily's stomach tightened. You're asking me to help you move looted art. I'm asking you to return it to its rightful owners. Quietly. Without alerting the current holder that he's been in possession of stolen property. That's impossible. Any authentication process that rigorous would require. You, he interrupted. It requires you. Your expertise, your discretion, and your willingness to bend certain legal frameworks that were designed to protect institutions, not individuals. Lily closed her eyes. This was exactly the kind of gray area work that could destroy her reputation, or make it legendary. What's in it for me? $3 million. Cash. Untraceable. Her eyes snapped open. That's significantly more than your usual commission. I know. Why so much? Because you'll be taking a risk. And because once this is done, you won't be able to work with certain institutions anymore. Museums have long memories. They don't like people who operate off the books, even for noble reasons. Lily's mind raced through the implications. $3 million would mean true independence, her own gallery, her own rules, her own clientele. But it would also mean burning bridges with the Met, the Guggenheim, every major institution that had taken years to trust her. I need to think about it. You have 12 hours. His voice softened slightly. And Lily, don't try to research me. You won't find anything useful, and it'll only make you more nervous. The line went dead. Lily stood there, phone still pressed to her ear, feeling like she'd just agreed to something without saying yes. She spent the next 6 hours trying to do exactly what he'd warned her not to: research him. The phone number traced back to a corporate shell in the Cayman Islands. The description she gave to her most discreet contacts yielded nothing. It was like he'd been designed to leave no footprint, which meant he was either very good at staying hidden or very powerful. Or both. At hour 11, she called back. Where and when? She could hear the smile in his voice. Tonight. I'll send a car. The car was a black Mercedes sedan with windows tinted so dark she couldn't see the driver's face. It picked her up at 9 p.m. outside her building and drove her north, out of Manhattan and into Westchester County, where estates sprawled behind iron gates and old money built legacies in stone. They stopped at a property that looked like it had been transplanted from the French countryside, all elegant proportions and manicured gardens, lit from below, so the trees cast long shadows across the lawn. The driver opened her door without a word. Inside, the house was silent. Museum-quality art hung on every wall, pieces Lily recognized from auction catalogs and private sale rumors: a Rothko, a Basquiat. What looked like an early Picasso sketch, framed in simple wood. "You collect," she said to the empty foyer. "I acquire." His voice came from above. She looked up to find him descending a curved staircase, dressed now in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Casual, disarming, somehow more dangerous than the tuxedo had been. There's a difference? Collectors care about legacy. I care about value. He led her through a series of rooms, each one more exquisite than the last, until they reached a study lined with books that looked like they'd been read rather than displayed for show. A fire burned in the hearth despite the mild evening, and on the wall above the mantel hung a painting that made Lily's breath stop. It was small, maybe 18 by 24 inches, but the brushwork was unmistakable. Bold strokes of crimson and gold, a figure barely suggested in the negative space, pre-war expressionism. German, if she had to guess. "Is that a Kirchner?" he confirmed, stolen from a Jewish family in Berlin in 1943. The Nazis catalogued it as degenerate art and sold it for scrap value. It passed through 6 owners before landing here. Lily moved closer, her trained eye catching the details that confirmed authenticity: the craquelure in the paint, the canvas weave, the signature hidden in the lower corner, so faint it was almost invisible. "It's real," she whispered. "I know. The question is whether you can prove it came from the Bergman family collection without alerting the current owner that I'm the one who wants it returned." Lily turned to face him. "Who's the current owner?" "A real estate developer in Connecticut. He bought it at an estate sale 15 years ago, paid $50,000. He has no idea what it's worth, or where it came from." "And you want me to, what? Offer to buy it?" "No. I want you to authenticate it publicly. Write a paper. Trace its provenance. Make enough noise that the Bergman descendants, there are 3, scattered across Israel and New York, hear about it and file a legal claim." "That could take years." "It'll take 6 months. I've already done most of the research. You just need to make it credible." He stepped closer, close enough that Lily had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "And you need to make sure no one questions why you suddenly took an interest in looted art recovery." "How do I explain that?" "You don't. You let people assume you've always cared. Passion doesn't need justification." Lily searched his face, looking for the angle, the hidden motive. "Why do you care about returning this painting?" For the first time, his expression flickered. Something raw passing through his eyes before the mask of control slid back into place. "Because I know what it's like to have your history stolen." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with something Lily couldn't name. Pain. Rage. A kind of grief that had calcified into purpose. She should have pressed. should have asked the follow-up questions that would reveal who he really was, what he really wanted. Instead, she found herself saying, "I'll do it." His expression softened. Just barely. Just enough. "Good. But I have conditions." "Of course you do. I need full access to your research, everything you've found about the painting's history, and I need your word that once this is done, I walk away clean. No ties. No obligations." He studied her for a long moment, then extended his hand. Agreed. His grip was warm, strong, the kind of handshake that sealed deals worth millions. But when Lily tried to pull away, he held on, just a second longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across the inside of her wrist where her pulse beat visibly against her skin. "One more thing," he said quietly. "What?" "Stay for dinner." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. Something in between, an invitation that felt like a dare. Lily should have said no, should have maintained professional distance, should have recognized that every minute she spent in his presence was another thread binding her to something she didn't fully understand. Instead, she said, "What are we having?" Dinner was served in a room overlooking the gardens, where the last of the evening light turned everything amber and soft. The table was set for two, no staff hovering, no interruptions. Just wine that tasted like it cost more than her car, and food that appeared in courses timed perfectly to the rhythm of their conversation. They didn't talk about the painting. Instead, he asked about her childhood, about growing up in Boston with a father who taught art history and a mother who died when Lily was 12. About the first time she'd seen a Vermeer in person and understood that some brush strokes carried entire worlds. She asked about his scars, the one on his jaw, the faint marks on his knuckles that suggested repeated impact. "Boxing," he said simply, competitively, "survival." He didn't elaborate, and Lily didn't push. Instead, she told him about the months she'd spent in Florence after college, learning to distinguish authentic Renaissance works from brilliant forgeries by studying the way light moved through centuries-old varnish. "You love it," he observed. "Not the money, the work itself." "Doesn't everyone love what they're good at?" "No." He refilled her wine glass with careful precision. "Most people are good at things they've learned to tolerate. Very few people find the thing that makes them feel alive." "And you? Have you found it?" His gaze locked onto hers, and Lily felt the air between them shift, charging with something that had been building since the moment they'd met. "I'm looking at it." The words should have been corny. A line. The kind of thing men said when they wanted something and thought charm would get them there. But the way he said it, quiet, certain, like he was stating a fact rather than making a play, made Lily's skin flush hot. She set down her wineglass with trembling fingers. "I should go." "Should you?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because this feels dangerous. Because I don't know your real name. Because I'm sitting in a house that probably has more secrets than rooms, eating dinner with a man who could be a criminal or a vigilante or something worse." "Because," she said instead, "I don't make a habit of getting involved with clients." "We're not involved. Yet." "Yet?" He stood, moving around the table with that same predatory grace she'd noticed at the gala. When he reached her chair, he didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell that cedar and smoke scent that was already starting to feel familiar. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake, that mixing business with whatever this was would only end badly. But there was another part, the part that had built a career on calculated risks, on trusting her instincts even when the data said otherwise, that wanted to see what happened next. She didn't tell him to stop. Instead, she stood, closing the last few inches between them, and looked up into those dark, dangerous eyes. "What's your name?" she whispered. "Does it matter?" "Yes." He reached up, brushing a strand of hair back from her face with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. "Alexander. Just Alexander? For tonight." And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't tentative. It was the kind of kiss that erased questions and rewrote boundaries, that tasted like wine and want, and something darker she couldn't name. His hands cupped her face, tilted her head back, and Lily felt herself dissolving into the sensation of being wanted with this kind of intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander's thumb traced the curve of her lower lip. "Stay," he said. Not a question, not quite a command, something in between. Lily knew, with the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes in moments of profound decision, that if she said yes, everything would change. The careful professional life she'd built, the boundaries she'd maintained, the version of herself she'd spent years perfecting, all of it would crack open, and she had no idea what would spill out. "Just tonight," she heard herself say. Alexander smiled, a real smile this time, the kind that transformed his entire face into something almost boyish. "Just tonight," he agreed. He led her upstairs to a bedroom that felt more like a sanctuary than a sleeping space. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the darkened gardens. A fire burned low in another hearth. The bed was enormous, dressed in sheets that looked like they cost more than her monthly rent. But Lily barely noticed the room, because Alexander was looking at her like she was the only valuable thing in the entire house, and everything else was just set dressing. He undressed her slowly, unzipping her dress with careful reverence, sliding it down her shoulders until it pooled at her feet. His hands traced the curve of her spine, the dip of her waist, mapping her body like she was a masterpiece he'd been waiting years to examine up close. "You're shaking," he murmured against her throat. "I don't do this." "I know." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Neither do I." It should have been a lie. Everything about him suggested experience, control, the kind of expertise that came from practice. But something in his voice made her believe him, made her think that maybe this was as unprecedented for him as it was for her. They fell into bed together, and Lily stopped thinking. There was only sensation, the slide of skin against skin, the taste of him, the way he said her name like it was something sacred. He learned her body with the same focused intensity he probably applied to everything else, paying attention to every gasp, every shiver, every signal that told him what she needed. And when he finally moved inside her, when they found that rhythm that felt less like sex and more like recognition, Lily understood why people wrote poetry about moments like this. Because some things couldn't be explained, only felt. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like cedar and sweat. Alexander's arm heavy across her waist, his breathing steady against her neck. Lily stared at the ceiling, feeling her heart rate slowly return to normal, and tried to convince herself that she could walk away from this cleanly, that it was just one night, just chemistry. Just a beautiful mistake that would fade into memory. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie, because Alexander's hand had come to rest on her stomach, his palm warm against her skin, and something about that gesture felt like a promise, or a claim, or both. Lily woke to empty sheets and cold panic. The sun was too bright, mid-morning bright, which meant she'd slept far later than she ever did. Her dress was folded neatly over a chair, her shoes placed beside it. Even her phone had been plugged into a charger on the nightstand. But Alexander was gone. She dressed quickly, her hands clumsy with the zipper, her mind racing through a dozen scenarios. Maybe he was downstairs making coffee. Maybe he'd stepped out to take a call. Maybe. The house was silent when she descended the stairs. Not just quiet, empty. The kind of empty that felt deliberate, like someone had erased their presence from the space entirely. In the study where they'd first discussed the painting, Lily found an envelope on the desk, her name written in clean, angular handwriting across the front. Inside, a key card to a safety deposit box, an address for a bank in Midtown, and a single sheet of paper covered in notes. Provenance research, auction records, family trees tracing the Bergman descendants. Everything she'd need to authenticate the Kirschner and build the case for its return. No note, no explanation, no phone number to call, just the research, and the implicit understanding that she was now committed. Lily stood in that beautiful, empty house and felt something crack inside her chest. She'd known it was one night. He'd told her exactly that. But some foolish part of her had thought, had hoped, that maybe the way he'd touched her, the way he'd said her name, had meant something more than a transaction. The car was waiting outside to take her home. She didn't look back at the house as they drove away. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of research and writing. Lily dove into the project with the kind of focused intensity she usually reserved for career-defining deals. She cross-referenced auction catalogs, interviewed descendants of the Bergman family, traveled to Berlin to examine wartime records that had been recently declassified. The work was meticulous, consuming, the kind of thing that should have filled every corner of her mind. But at night, alone in her apartment, she kept returning to that single evening, the way Alexander's hand had felt against her skin. The sound of his voice saying her name, the certainty in his eyes when he'd told her she was what made him feel alive. She told herself it was just chemistry, just the thrill of something forbidden. She almost believed it. Until the morning she woke up nauseous for the 3rd day in a row, and the world tilted sideways. The pregnancy test sat on her bathroom counter like an accusation. 2 pink lines, clear, unmistakable. Lily stared at it until her vision blurred, her mind stuttering through impossible calculations. She'd been on birth control. They'd used protection. The odds of this happening were irrelevant, because it had happened. She was carrying a child conceived during a single night with a man whose last name she didn't know, whose phone number she didn't have, whose entire existence felt like something she'd dreamed. Lily's hands shook as she picked up her phone. She scrolled through her contacts, looking for someone to call. Her father? No, he'd worry. Her assistant? Absolutely not. The one friend who might understand. Her thumb hovered over the number, then stopped. Because what would she even say? I slept with a mysterious stranger who paid me $3 million to authenticate a stolen painting, and now I'm pregnant with his child, and I have no way to find him? It sounded insane, even in her own head. Lily set down the phone and pressed both palms flat against her stomach. Still flat, still unchanged. But somehow different now. Inhabited. Okay, she whispered to the empty bathroom. Okay. She'd built a business from nothing, had navigated the cutthroat world of high-value art dealing without compromising her integrity, had learned to authenticate masterpieces by trusting her instincts even when the evidence was incomplete. She could handle this. She would handle this. Alone, if necessary. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt almost clarifying. She'd always been good at solving problems other people found impossible. This was just another impossible problem, with very high stakes, and absolutely no margin for error. Lily looked at herself in the mirror, really looked, taking inventory of the woman staring back. Same dark hair, same sharp eyes, same face that had convinced billionaires and museum directors to trust her judgment. But something had shifted. Some fundamental recalibration of priorities. Because for the first time in her adult life, there was something more important than her career. She just had to figure out what to do about it. The article went viral 3 weeks later. Looted Kirshner painting surfaces in Connecticut estate. Descendants seek return. Lily had published it in a prestigious art journal, complete with provenance documentation, family testimonies, and photographic evidence that made the case irrefutable. Within 48 hours, it had been picked up by the Times, the Post, and every major art publication in the Western world. The Connecticut developer called her office 6 times in one day, panicked and furious. The Bergman descendants' lawyer reached out to discuss the legal process for repatriation, and the museum community, the same institutions Lily had worried about alienating, lauded her for bringing attention to an underreported issue. She'd done it. Pulled off the impossible. Returned a masterpiece to its rightful owners while somehow enhancing her own reputation in the process. The $3 million appeared in her account exactly as promised. Untraceable, clean, accompanied by a wire transfer note that simply read, "Well done." No signature, no contact information. Just those 2 words, and the money that would change her life. Lily stared at her bank balance and felt nothing but hollow victory, because she was 12 weeks pregnant now, past the first trimester, past the point where she could pretend it might not be real. Her body was changing in small, undeniable ways. Her clothes fit differently. She was tired constantly. And every morning, she woke up alone in her apartment, carrying the child of a man who'd vanished like smoke. She'd tried to find him, had called the phone number he'd given her, only to find it disconnected. Had driven back to the Westchester estate, only to discover it was owned by a shell corporation with no traceable leadership. Had even hired a private investigator, who'd returned 3 weeks later with nothing but apologies and a refund. Alexander, if that was even his real name, had disappeared so completely it was like he'd never existed. Except for the child growing inside her. The most permanent proof imaginable. Lily was standing in her office, one hand pressed unconsciously to her stomach, when her assistant knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you," Kara said, her voice strangely tight. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. Tell him I'm booked for the day." "Lily." Kara's eyes were wide. "I really think you should take this meeting." Something in her assistant's tone made Lily's pulse spike. "Who is it?" Kara stepped aside, and Alexander walked into her office like he'd never left. He looked exactly the same dark eyes, same sharp features, same presence that seemed to compress all the air in the room. But there was something different now. Something harder in the set of his jaw, something almost regretful in the way he looked at her. Lily's first instinct was to throw something at him. Her second was to cry. She did neither. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and said with perfect ice, "Get out." Alexander closed the door behind him with careful precision. "We need to talk. We needed to talk 3 months ago, before you disappeared without a word." "I know." He moved closer, and Lily forced herself not to step back. "And I'm sorry." "Sorry?" The word came out sharp enough to cut. "You vanish after that? And you think sorry covers it?" "No." His voice was quiet, controlled. "I think nothing covers it. But I'm here now, and I need you to listen." "Why should I?" "Because," Alexander said, his gaze dropping briefly to her stomach before returning to her face, "you're carrying my child, and there are people who will kill you for it if they find out." The world stopped. Lily heard the words, understood them individually, but her brain couldn't seem to assemble them into coherent meaning. "How?" Her voice cracked. "How do you know?" "I've had people watching you, discreetly, making sure you were safe." "You've been spying on me?" "Protecting you." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the fine lines of tension around his eyes. "There's a reason I left, Lily. A reason I couldn't contact you, and it has nothing to do with not wanting to." Then what? Alexander was silent for a long moment. Then he said, in a voice that sounded like it cost him something, "My name is Alexander Volkov. I run the Volkov organization, what you'd probably call the Bratva, Russian Mafia. And 3 months ago, when I met you at that gala, I was supposed to be meeting with a rival family to negotiate a truce." Lily's legs suddenly felt unsteady. She reached back, gripping the edge of her desk for support. You're Mafia? Yes. The night you were working? No. His expression cracked slightly, something raw showing through. That night was the first time in 15 years I did something that wasn't calculated. That wasn't part of a strategy. I saw you, and I. He stopped, his jaw tightening. I made a choice, and that choice put you in danger. Lily's mind spun through the implications, all the pieces suddenly rearranging themselves into a picture that made terrible sense. The house that wasn't in his name, the research he'd already done on the Kirschner, the $3 million that appeared with no paper trail. The painting, she said slowly. That was real, wasn't it? The Bergman family, the looted art. All real. I meant what I said about returning it. But I also needed a reason to keep tabs on you, to make sure no one connected you to me. Why would anyone connect me to you? Alexander's expression turned grim. Because the night we met, someone saw us together, took photos, and they've been trying to figure out who you are ever since. If they discover you're pregnant, if they realize the child is mine, they'll come after me. Lily finished the thought, feeling cold dread settle in her stomach. To get to you. Yes. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to rage about the impossibility of this situation, the unfairness of being dragged into a world of violence she'd never asked to enter. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What do we do?" Alexander's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features, followed by something that looked almost like relief. "We?" he repeated. "I'm not an idiot," Lily said, forcing steel into her voice even though she was shaking. "If what you're saying is true, if I'm in danger, then I need protection. And you're the only one who can provide it. You'd trust me? After everything?" Lily looked at him, really looked, past the danger and the lies and the 3 months of silence. Looked at the way his hands were clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. At the tension in his jaw that suggested this conversation was costing him more than he was letting show. "I don't trust you," she said quietly, "but I believe you don't want me dead. Which is more than I can say for these other people." Alexander's throat worked. "I'll keep you safe. I swear it." "How?" "You'll need to leave your apartment. Your office, everything that's traceable to your old life. I have a secure location, a compound upstate. You'll stay there until we can neutralize the threat." "For how long?" "I don't know." Lily pressed both hands to her stomach, feeling the slight curve that was only just beginning to show. "And the baby?" "Will be protected." Alexander's voice dropped to something almost gentle. "Both of you will be protected. No matter what it takes." Lily wanted to ask more questions. Wanted guarantees and timelines and evidence that this wasn't some elaborate manipulation. But she could see the truth in his eyes, the same truth she'd seen that night when he'd told her she made him feel alive. This was real. The danger. The threat. The impossible situation she'd stumbled into. And the man standing in front of her. Criminal, liar, father of her unborn child, was the only thing standing between her and something far worse. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tonight. Pack light. Bring anything you can't replace." "What about my business? My assistant?" "I'll handle it. You're taking an extended research trip. Sabbatical? Whatever story makes sense." Lily nodded slowly, her mind already cataloging what she'd need to bring, how she'd explain this to her father, what would happen to her carefully constructed life. Alexander moved closer, stopping just short of touching her. "Lily, I'm sorry. For all of it." "Don't," she said, her voice rough. "Don't apologize. Just, just keep me alive." His hand lifted, hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her but wasn't sure he had the right. "I will. I promise you. I will." Lily stepped back before he could make contact. "I need to think. I need to." She pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache building behind her eyes. "This is insane. I know. I should call the police. They can't protect you. Not from this. How do I know you're not lying? How do I know this whole thing isn't some elaborate—" Alexander pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and handed it to her. The photos were grainy, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, but they were unmistakable. Lily and Alexander on the balcony at the gala. Lily and Alexander having dinner. The angles suggested surveillance, professional-grade equipment, and written across the bottom of each image in Cyrillic script was something that made Lily's blood run cold even before Alexander translated. "Volkov's weakness," he said quietly. "Find her. Use her." Lily's hands trembled as she handed back the phone. "When were these taken?" "The night we met. They've been circulating in certain circles for months. I've been trying to contain them, to keep your identity hidden, but—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "Someone leaked your name 2 weeks ago, which means they know who you are, where you live, everything." 2 weeks ago. Lily's mind raced backward, cataloging the last 14 days for anything unusual. "I've been followed, haven't I? That's how you know about—" She gestured vaguely at her stomach. "My people have been watching you," Alexander admitted. "So have theirs. The only reason you're still safe is because they're waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For confirmation. For proof that you matter enough to be worth the risk." His eyes dropped to her stomach again, and something painful crossed his face. "Once they know about the baby, they'll move. And when they do, it'll be fast and it'll be brutal." Lily felt the walls of her office closing in. This morning, her biggest concern had been whether to tell her father about the pregnancy before she started showing. Now she was learning that her life, and her child's life, depended on disappearing into protective custody with a man who ran a criminal empire. "I need air," she said, moving toward the window. Alexander caught her arm gently. "Not near the windows. Please." The please broke something in her, because it reminded her of that night, of the way he'd touched her like she was precious, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "That night, why didn't you tell me who you were?" "Because I wanted one night where I wasn't Alexander Volkov, where I was just—" He stopped, his thumb unconsciously stroking the inside of her wrist where her pulse hammered visibly. "Where I was just a man with a woman who made him forget what he was. And now? Now you need to know exactly what I am. Because the only way to keep you safe is if you understand what we're dealing with." Lily pulled her arm free, wrapping it around herself protectively. "Tell me then. All of it. If I'm going to trust you with my life, I need to know who you really are." Alexander's expression shuddered, decades of practiced control sliding into place, but he nodded and began to speak. "My family has run the Volkov organization for 4 generations, Alexander said, his voice taking on the flat, factual tone of someone reciting history that had been carved into them. "We control shipping routes, real estate, certain pharmaceutical supplies. We're not the largest operation, but we're one of the oldest. And in this world, legacy means leverage." He moved to her office door, checking that it was locked, before continuing. "I inherited control when I was 23. My father was killed in a territorial dispute. shot in front of me and my younger sister during a supposed peace negotiation. His jaw tightened. I spent the next decade consolidating power, eliminating rivals, building alliances. I became very good at it. Good enough that people stopped trying to kill me and started trying to negotiate. Lily listened, her arms still wrapped around herself, trying to reconcile this information with the man who'd kissed her like she was air. 6 months ago, a new player emerged, Dmitry Kasparov. Young, ambitious, brutal. He's been systematically taking territory from smaller organizations, absorbing their operations. He approached me in March with an offer. Merge our organizations or go to war. And you said no. I said I'd consider it. Which in this world means no, but gives everyone time to prepare. Alexander's gaze locked onto hers. The gala where we met. I was supposed to be there meeting with Kasparov's representative, showing strength, making it clear that any conflict would be costly for both sides. But you met me instead. Yes. Something in his expression cracked. And Kasparov's people took photos. They've been trying to identify you ever since, assuming you were either an informant or a weakness they could exploit. Lily's mind raced through the implications. So when you gave me the Kirchner project, I needed a legitimate reason to have contact with you, a way to monitor your safety without making it obvious I cared. He moved closer, his voice dropping. And I needed to know if you could handle being close to this world, if you were strong enough. Strong enough for what? For this. He gestured between them. For the life I could offer you, for the danger that comes with it. Lily wanted to laugh at the absurdity. You were testing me? I was protecting you. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Alexander was silent for a moment, then said quietly, You're right. I should have told you everything that night. Given you the choice to walk away before... He stopped, his gaze dropping to her stomach. Before it became permanent. Lily pressed her palm flat against the slight curve, feeling the reality of it all crash over her like a wave. What happens now? Even if I go to your compound, hide out for however long, eventually I'll need to come back. Resume my life. And I'll be visibly pregnant by then. I know. So what's the end game? I hide forever? Raise this child in witness protection? No. Alexander's voice turned hard, decisive. The endgame is eliminating Kasparov's organization before he can move against you. You're planning a war. I'm planning to win one. He stepped closer, close enough that Lily could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. But that takes time, and strategy, and resources I need to marshal carefully, which means I need you safe while I do it. Lily looked at him, at this man who'd just admitted to running a criminal empire, to testing her, to dragging her into a world of violence she'd never asked to enter, and felt something shift in her chest. Because despite everything, despite the lies and the danger and the impossible situation, she could see the truth in his eyes. He was terrified, not for himself, for her. For the child they'd created during one reckless night when neither of them had been thinking about consequences. If I do this, she said slowly, if I go with you, I need rules. Anything. I'm not your possession, I'm not your property. I'm a person who's choosing to accept your protection, but that doesn't make me yours. Something painful flickered across Alexander's face. Agreed. I want regular updates on what's happening. No keeping me in the dark for my own good. Yes. And when this is over, when Kasparov is dealt with, I get to decide what happens next. Whether I stay, whether we... She gestured vaguely between them. Whether any of this becomes something more permanent. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, in a voice that sounded like it cost him everything, What if I want it to be permanent? Lily's breath caught. What? What if I didn't just get you pregnant by accident? He moved closer, his hand lifting to cup her face with devastating gentleness. What if I've spent 3 months thinking about that night? About the way you looked at me like I was human instead of dangerous? What if I'm standing here terrified not just because you're in danger, but because I finally found something worth protecting, and I don't know how to do it without destroying it? Lily stared at him, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. You're saying, I'm saying I want this child. I want you. I want a life that isn't just violence and strategy and empty rooms. His thumb stroked her cheekbone. But I'll understand if you can't give me that. If all you can give me is time enough to keep you safe before you walk away. Lily should have been furious, should have pushed him away, should have insisted that 3 months of silence had forfeited any right he had to claim feelings. But she could see the truth written across his face, the same desperate recognition she'd felt that night when they'd fallen into bed together. This wasn't just chemistry, wasn't just an accidental pregnancy that needed managing. This was something deeper, more dangerous. The kind of thing that could either destroy them both or forge them into something stronger than either of them could be alone. I need time, she whispered, to process all of this, to figure out what I want. You'll have it. Alexander's hand dropped away from her face, leaving cold air in its wake. But for now, we need to move. Pack what you need. I'll have a team here in 2 hours to help you relocate. 2 hours? Kasparov's people are getting more aggressive. We don't have time to wait. Lily nodded, her mind already spinning through logistics. What do I tell people? That you're taking a research sabbatical, studying a private collection overseas. Your assistant can handle the day-to-day operations of your business, and I'll make sure she has resources to cover anything urgent. She'll have questions. Let her ask them. Just don't give her answers that could put her in danger. Lily pressed her palms flat against her desk, trying to anchor herself. 2 hours ago, she'd been planning which maternity clothes to buy. Now she was preparing to disappear into protective custody with a mafia boss. The absurdity of it should have been paralyzing. Instead, it felt almost clarifying. Because for 3 months, she'd been drifting, going through the motions of her life while some essential part of her remained trapped in that Westchester estate. Tangled in sheets that smelled like cedar, wondering if she'd imagined the connection she'd felt. Now she knew she hadn't. The connection was real, dangerous, complicated beyond belief, but real. Okay, she said quietly. I'll be ready. Alexander's expression softened slightly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might regret this. No. His voice carried absolute certainty. I won't. The drive upstate took 3 hours, most of it on back roads that wound through forests so dense they blocked out the afternoon sun. Lily sat in the back of an armored SUV, watching the world grow progressively more isolated, while Alexander made a series of phone calls in rapid Russian. She'd packed 2 suitcases, clothes, toiletries, her laptop with years of research backed up on encrypted drives. Everything else, her apartment, her office, her carefully curated life, had been left behind with instructions to Kara about the research sabbatical she was supposedly taking. Her assistant had looked suspicious, but hadn't asked the questions Lily could see forming behind her eyes. Small mercies. The compound appeared suddenly as they rounded a curve, a sprawling estate protected by high stone walls and gates that opened silently at their approach. Inside, the property looked like something from a European countryside magazine: manicured gardens, a main house built from gray stone, several outbuildings that probably served purposes Lily didn't want to know about. Armed guards were stationed discreetly at intervals along the perimeter. Lily's stomach clenched. This was real. This was her life now, at least temporarily. Alexander helped her out of the car, his hand warm and steady on her lower back. "It's secure," he said quietly, reading her expression. "No one gets in or out without clearance. You're safe here." Safe feels relative right now. I know. He guided her toward the main house. "But I need you to trust me. Just for now." Inside, the house was surprisingly warm. All wood beams and stone fireplaces, comfortable furniture that looked lived in rather than staged. A far cry from the showpiece estate where they'd spent that single night. "Your room is upstairs," Alexander said, leading her through a great room where several men in dark clothing were having a low-voiced conversation. They stopped talking as Alexander and Lily passed, their gazes tracking her with professional assessment, evaluating the threat, or the asset. Lily forced herself to keep her shoulders straight, her expression calm. The bedroom Alexander showed her to was spacious, with large windows overlooking the gardens and an ensuite bathroom that looked recently renovated. Her suitcases were already there, placed neatly at the foot of a bed dressed in soft gray linens. "There's a security detail assigned to you specifically," Alexander said, staying near the doorway like he was afraid to come closer. "They'll be discreet, but they're always watching. If you need anything, food, clothes, books, anything, just ask." "Am I a prisoner?" "No." His voice was firm. "You're a guest who's being protected. You can go anywhere on the property. I'd just ask that you don't leave the grounds without letting me know." Lily moved to the window, looking out at the manicured lawns and the forest beyond. "How long do you think this will take? The situation with Kasparov?" "Honestly?" Alexander came to stand beside her, maintaining careful distance. "I don't know. Weeks. Maybe months. It depends on how quickly I can gather the alliances I need and how reckless Kasparov is feeling. And in the meantime, I just wait. You survive. You stay safe. You let your body do what it needs to do." His gaze dropped to her stomach, something achingly tender crossing his face. "That's all I'm asking." Lily turned to face him fully. "What about you? Where will you be?" "Here mostly. I can run operations from the compound, but there will be times I need to be in the city. Meetings that can't happen remotely." "Dangerous meetings?" "Sometimes." "And if something happens to you?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. "If Kasparov decides to eliminate the problem directly?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "I've survived this long by being careful. I'm not planning to stop now." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, his hand came to rest on her shoulder. "But I promise you, I will do everything in my power to come back. To both of you." Lily felt something crack in her chest, because despite everything, the lies, the danger, the impossible situation, she believed him. "Okay," she whispered. Alexander's hand slid from her shoulder to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "I need you to know something." "What?" That night, it wasn't calculated. It wasn't strategic. For the first time in 15 years, I made a choice based purely on what I wanted rather than what I needed. His dark eyes searched hers. "And I would make it again, even knowing the consequences." Lily's breath hitched. "Alexander?" He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to stop him, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Tender, reverent, nothing like the consuming passion of that first night. "Rest," he said quietly. "I'll have dinner sent up." Then he was gone, closing the door behind him with careful precision, leaving Lily alone in a beautiful room in a fortified compound with a child growing inside her and no clear path forward. She pressed both hands to her stomach and whispered, "What have we gotten ourselves into?" The baby, of course, didn't answer. The first week passed in a strange rhythm of domesticity and danger. Lily woke each morning to breakfast left outside her door. Fresh fruit, yogurt, perfectly brewed coffee that had been decaffeinated without her asking. She spent her days reading, researching, occasionally venturing into the gardens where armed guards pretended not to watch her every move. Alexander appeared at odd hours. Early mornings when she was sitting in the kitchen with her laptop, late evenings when she couldn't sleep, and found herself wandering the house. They developed an unspoken routine. He'd pour her tea, she'd ask what he was working on, and they'd talk about everything except the situation that had brought them here. Art, books, her childhood in Boston. His sister, who was finishing medical school in London and knew nothing about his real work. "She thinks I'm in international finance," he said one night, both of them sitting in front of the fire in the great room. "Which isn't entirely a lie. Does she know about me?" "No." His gaze slid to her stomach, where the curve was becoming more pronounced. "Not yet. Will you tell her?" "When it's safe. When I can introduce you properly rather than explaining why you're in protective custody." Lily sipped her tea, letting the warmth spread through her. "What will you say? This is Lily. I got her pregnant during a one-night stand, and now she's trapped in my compound because people want to kill her?" Alexander's mouth quirked. "I was thinking something more like, this is Lily, the mother of my child and the woman who makes me want to be more than what I am." The words hit Lily like a physical blow. She set down her tea carefully. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it's not fair. Because I'm here under duress. And any feelings that develop are going to be complicated by circumstance." "You think I don't know that?" Alexander leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. "You think I haven't spent every day of the past week trying to figure out where the line is between protecting you and manipulating you? And have you figured it out?" "No." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "But I know that when I see you in the mornings, the first thing I feel is relief that you're safe. And when I have to leave for meetings, the first thing I feel is fear that something will happen while I'm gone. And when I come back and you're curled up reading in the library, the first thing I feel is something I don't have a name for, something that makes me want to burn down the entire world just to keep you safe." Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. "That's not love. That's obsession." "Maybe." His eyes held hers. "Or maybe it's what love looks like when you've spent 15 years thinking you were incapable of it." "Alexander." A phone buzzed sharply, cutting through the moment. Alexander pulled it from his pocket, his expression shifting to something cold and focused as he read the message. "I need to go," he said, already standing. "There's been a development." "What kind of development?" "The kind I need to handle personally." He moved toward the door, then stopped, turning back. "Stay inside tonight. Don't go near the windows. And if anyone comes for you, anyone at all, you go to the safe room in the basement. The guards know where it is." Fear iced through Lily's veins. "You're scaring me." "Good." His voice was hard now, all traces of softness gone. "Fear keeps you careful. Careful keeps you alive." Then he was gone, and Lily was left, alone in a house full of armed men, pregnant and terrified, waiting for morning to see if the father of her child would come back. He did come back. At 3 a.m., Lily woke to the sound of voices in the hallway, low, urgent. She pulled on a robe and cracked open her door to find Alexander standing outside, his white shirt stained with something dark, his face a mask of controlled fury. "You're hurt," Lily said, the words coming out steadier than she felt. "It's not my blood." Alexander's gaze found hers, and something in his expression made her stomach clench. "We need to talk." She led him into her room, closing the door behind them, and watched as he moved to the bathroom to wash his hands. The water ran red, then pink, then clear. When he emerged, his face was pale beneath his tan. Kasparov made a move tonight, he said quietly. Hit one of my warehouses. Killed 3 men. Left a message. What kind of message? Alexander pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It was a bouquet of white lilies, placed carefully among the debris and bodies. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. He knows my name. Yes. Which means he knows everything. Alexander's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. He knows you're pregnant. He knows where you were living. And he knows that you're the fastest way to hurt me. Lily sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. So what now? Now I stop playing defense and start playing offense. Alexander knelt in front of her, his hands coming to rest on her knees. I need you to trust me. I need you to believe that I can end this. How? By doing what I should have done 3 months ago. His voice dropped to something almost gentle. By claiming you publicly. By making it clear that you're not a weakness. You're a strength. And anyone who comes for you will face the full weight of the Volkov organization. Lily stared at him. You want to use me as bait. No. His hands tightened on her knees. I want to use you as a declaration. There's a difference. Explain it to me. In my world, hiding something means it's vulnerable. Announcing something means it's protected. He held her gaze. If I claim you, if I make it public that you're carrying my child, that you're under my protection, Kasparov will have to back down or risk open war with every organization that respects old rules. And if he doesn't respect those rules, then we go to war. Alexander's voice was cold, final. But at least you'll be protected by something stronger than secrecy. Lily tried to process this, her mind spinning through implications. You're asking me to become your... what? Your mistress? Your wife? I'm asking you to let me protect you the only way I know how. He paused, then added quietly, but if you're asking what I want the answer to be, it's wife. The word hung in the air between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. You're insane, Lily whispered. Probably. We've known each other for 3 months, and most of that time, you were gone. I know. This isn't how people build relationships. I know. Alexander's hand slid up to cup her face. But we're not most people. And this isn't a normal situation. And I'm standing here covered in someone else's blood, asking you to tie yourself to me permanently, because it's the only way I can think of to keep you alive. Lily searched his face, looking for the angle, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. All she found was raw, desperate honesty. If I say yes, she said slowly, it's not because I love you, it's because I'm choosing survival. Something painful flickered across Alexander's features. I know. And if this ends, if Kasparov is dealt with and the threat is gone, I reserve the right to walk away. I know. Even if we're married by then. Lily. His voice cracked slightly. I'll give you anything you ask for. Anything except the freedom to put yourself in danger. She looked at him. At this man who'd turned her life upside down, who'd gotten her pregnant during a reckless night, who was now offering her his name and his protection and the full weight of his dangerous world. And she realized that somewhere in the past week, she'd stopped being terrified of him. Started being terrified for him, which was somehow worse. Okay, she whispered. Alexander's eyes widened. Okay? I'll marry you. I'll let you claim me publicly. I'll do whatever it takes to keep this baby safe. She pressed her palm to her stomach. But you need to promise me something. Anything. That you'll come back. That you won't take unnecessary risks. That you'll fight to survive, not just to win. Alexander pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. I promise, he said against her temple. I swear to you, I'll come back. Lily let herself sink into the embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, and tried to believe him. The wedding happened 3 days later in a private courthouse in Manhattan with a judge who'd been paid enough to forget the ceremony had ever occurred. Lily wore a simple cream dress that accommodated her growing belly. Alexander wore a dark suit that probably cost more than her first car. And they stood in front of a man who looked deeply uncomfortable officiating a union that was clearly more transaction than romance. "Do you, Alexander Mikhail Volkov, take this woman?" "I do." The judge blinked. "I haven't finished the question." "I know. The answer is yes." Lily might have laughed if the situation weren't so surreal. When it was her turn, she said, "I do," with steady voice and shaking hands, and tried not to think about how she'd imagined this moment as a child. Fairy tale wedding, white dress, everyone she loved in attendance. Instead, she got a quick ceremony with 6 armed guards outside, and a man she barely knew, sliding a ring onto her finger that probably cost more than her entire business. "You may kiss the bride," the judge said, sounding relieved it was almost over. Alexander cupped her face with careful reverence and kissed her softly. Nothing like their first kiss. Nothing like the consuming passion of that single night. This was gentle, deliberate. A promise rather than a claiming. When they broke apart, his thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Thank you," he whispered, quiet enough that only she could hear. Lily didn't trust herself to respond. The announcement went out that evening through carefully controlled channels. No press release, no public statement. Just information flowing through the networks that mattered. Whispers in exclusive clubs. Conversations at private dinners. Messages passed between organizations that had been watching the situation develop. Alexander Volkov has married. His wife is pregnant. She is under the protection of the full Volkov organization. Any move against her will be considered a declaration of war. Within 12 hours, Lily's phone, which had been mostly silent during her time at the compound, exploded with messages. Her father, confused and hurt. "Married. Lily, what's going on? Call me immediately." Her assistant, professional but worried. "I saw the news. Are you safe? Do you need anything?" Friends she hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly curious about her whirlwind romance with a mysterious businessman. And one message that made her blood run cold. From an unknown number. "Congratulations on your wedding. White lilies are traditional, aren't they? Perhaps I'll send some to your new home." Lily showed the message to Alexander, who read it with an expression that could have frozen fire. "He's taunting us," she said unnecessarily. "Yes." Alexander handed back the phone. "Which means he's planning something." "What do we do?" "We prepare." He pulled her close, one hand coming to rest protectively on her stomach. "And we make sure that when he moves, we're ready." The attack came 2 weeks later, at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Lily woke to the sound of gunfire, sharp cracks that shattered the night silence. For a moment, her sleep-fogged brain couldn't process what she was hearing. Then training kicked in. The drills Alexander had insisted on. The escape routes memorized. The safe room location burned into her memory. She rolled out of bed, pulled on shoes and a robe, and ran for the door. Alexander was already there, dressed in black tactical gear, a gun in his hand. "Safe room. Now." His voice was hard, commanding. "Don't stop for anything." "What about you?" "I'll handle this." "Go." 2 guards appeared at his shoulder, both armed, both wearing expressions of grim determination. They flanked Lily as she ran down the hallway toward the basement stairs, the sound of gunfire growing louder. The safe room was a reinforced bunker built into the foundation. Thick walls, independent power supply, enough supplies to last weeks if necessary. Lily punched in the code with shaking hands and stumbled inside. The door sealed behind her with a heavy thunk. And then there was silence. Terrible, Absolute silence. Lily sank to the floor, her back against the wall, both hands pressed to her stomach where the baby was kicking, agitated, sensing her fear. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay. Your father will come back. He promised." Minutes stretched into hours. Lily tracked time by her heartbeat, by the baby's movements, by the growing ache in her back from sitting on cold concrete. No one came. The silence continued. Lily closed her eyes and prayed to God she wasn't sure she believed in. When the door finally opened, after what felt like days but was probably only 4 hours, Alexander stood on the other side. He was covered in blood. His face was bruised. His knuckles were split and raw, but he was alive. "It's over," he said, his voice hoarse. "Kasparov's dead. His organization is scattered. You're safe." Lily stared at him, her mind unable to process the words. "Dead?" "Yes." Alexander moved into the safe room, kneeling in front of her with visible effort. "He came himself. Thought he could take me in my own home. He was wrong." "You killed him?" "Yes." Lily should have been horrified, should have been disgusted by the violence, by the casual way he said it, by the blood still staining his clothes. Instead, she threw her arms around him and held on like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. "You came back," she whispered against his shoulder. "I promised." His arms wrapped around her, careful of her stomach, his face buried in her hair. "I'll always come back." They stayed like that, tangled together on the floor of a bunker, both of them shaking with adrenaline and relief, until the baby kicked hard enough to get Alexander's attention. He pulled back, his hand moving to her stomach with automatic gentleness. "We're fine," Lily said. "Both of us. Just scared." Alexander's expression cracked completely, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw him cry. Not much. Just a few tears that tracked through the blood and dirt on his face. But enough to show her that beneath the ruthless Mafia boss was a man who'd been terrified of losing them. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "I'm so sorry I brought this into your life." "I know." Lily cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "But we're here now. We're safe. And we're going to figure out what comes next. Together?" The question held so much hope it hurt to hear. Lily thought about the past 3 months, about the night that had changed everything, about the impossible situation they'd navigated, the danger they'd survived, the child growing between them, about the way he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd stopped asking years ago. "Together?" she said, and kissed him. Epilogue, 6 months later. The nursery was painted a soft sage green, with white furniture and shelves already filling with books. Lily stood in the doorway, one hand pressed to her very pregnant belly, watching as Alexander assembled a crib with focused intensity. "You know we could have hired someone to do that," she said. "I want to do it." He didn't look up from the instruction manual. "First thing our daughter sees should be something her father built. It's a crib, not a castle. Details?" Lily smiled, moving into the room to sit in the rocking chair they'd chosen together. Her back was killing her. She was 8.5 months along now, waddling more than walking, ready for this pregnancy to be over. But watching Alexander frown at Swedish furniture instructions made it worth the discomfort. They'd stayed at the compound for 2 months after Kasparov's death, long enough for Alexander to consolidate power, eliminate remaining threats, and restructure his organization into something that required less direct violence. He'd brought in legitimate business managers, diversified into legal holdings, and slowly transformed the Volkov empire into something that existed more on paper than in dark alleys. It wasn't perfect. Probably never would be. But it was safer. Lily had returned to her business 3 months ago, walking back into her office to find that Kara had handled everything flawlessly. Clients were happy, Auctions were scheduled, and no one asked too many questions about her sudden marriage or her growing belly or the armed security that now accompanied her everywhere. Some things people knew better than to question. Done, Alexander announced, stepping back to admire his handiwork. The crib looked perfect, sturdy, safe, ready for the tiny human who would occupy it soon. Thank you, Lily said softly. Alexander came to kneel beside her chair, his hand finding her stomach where the baby was doing what felt like gymnastics. His expression softened into something she'd seen more and more often over the past months: unguarded tenderness. She's active today, he murmured. She's been active all week. I think she's running out of room. Soon. His thumb traced gentle circles over the spot where a tiny foot was pushing against Lily's ribs. Are you scared? Terrified, Lily admitted. Of the birth. Of being a mother. Of somehow screwing up this tiny person's life. You won't. You don't know that. I do. Alexander looked up at her, his dark eyes serious. Because you're the strongest person I know. You survived being thrown into my world. You faced down actual assassins while pregnant. You rebuilt your business while dealing with morning sickness and a husband who didn't know how to be a husband. Lily's throat tightened. You're doing fine at being a husband. Am I? His hand moved from her stomach to lace his fingers through hers. Because I keep waiting for you to wake up and realize you could do better. That you deserve someone without blood on their hands and enemies waiting in the shadows. Alexander, I know what we agreed, he interrupted. That you could walk away once the threat was gone. That this was about survival, not love. But it's been 6 months, and I need to know. He stopped, his jaw working. I need to know if you're staying because you want to, or because you feel obligated. Lily looked at him, at this man who'd turned her life into something she never could have imagined, who'd protected her with ruthless efficiency and held her with devastating gentleness, who'd built a crib with his own hands and cried when he felt their daughter kick, who'd somehow become the person she looked for first thing every morning and last thing every night. Do you remember that night? She asked. The first night, at the estate. Every second. You asked me if I was ready to stop playing in the shallow end. Lily squeezed his hand. I didn't understand what you meant then. I thought you were talking about art dealing, about taking risks in my career. I was talking about life, Alexander said quietly, about finding something that made you feel alive instead of just successful. I know that now. She brought his hand to her lips, pressed a kiss to his scarred knuckles. And the answer is yes. I'm ready. I've been ready since the moment I called you the morning after, even though I told myself I shouldn't. Lily, I'm staying, she said firmly. Not because I'm obligated, not because I'm afraid, because somewhere between that first night and now, I fell in love with you. And I know that's probably just Stockholm Syndrome or hormones or some combination of trauma bonding and… Alexander kissed her, cutting off the spiral of doubt. It was soft and deep, and full of the kind of emotion he usually kept locked behind carefully maintained control. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. It's not trauma bonding, he said roughly. It's not hormones. It's not any of the reasons you're trying to logic your way out of this. It's real. What we have. What we've built. It's real. How do you know? Because I've spent 15 years feeling nothing. And then I saw you across a ballroom. And suddenly I could feel everything. His hand cupped her face. You make me want to be more than what I was. You make me believe I can be. Lily felt tears spill over, pregnancy hormones amplifying everything until she was crying and laughing at the same time. We're a mess. The best kind of mess. We're raising a child in the aftermath of a mob war. She'll be protected, loved. She'll never doubt that she's wanted. What if she asks about how we met? Alexander's mouth quirked. We'll tell her the truth. That I saw her mother at a party and knew immediately that my life was about to change. That I made every wrong decision and several right ones. That her mother is the strongest, smartest, most stubborn woman I've ever met, and I'm lucky she gave me a chance to prove I could be worth her time. You're going to spoil her, Lily said, wiping at her tears. Absolutely. She's going to be the most protected, most loved, most spoiled child in New York. And when she's old enough, she's going to learn that her father runs an empire and her mother built one from nothing. And together, they're unstoppable. Is that what we are? Unstoppable? Look at what we've survived. Alexander stood, pulling Lily carefully to her feet, his arms wrapping around her as much as her belly would allow. We survived danger and secrets and a beginning that should have destroyed us. We're still here, still together, still building something that matters. Lily leaned into him, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. Outside, armed guards patrolled the perimeter of their Upper East Side townhouse, the compromise they'd reached between Alexander's need for security and Lily's need to not feel like she was living in a fortress. Inside, a nursery waited for their daughter. A life waited for them, complicated, dangerous in ways that most people never experienced, but theirs. I love you, she said, the words coming easier now. I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. I love you. Alexander's arms tightened around her. I love you. I've loved you since that first night, even though I didn't have the words for it yet. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for. The baby kicked hard between them as if agreeing. They both laughed, the sound breaking the emotional tension. She has opinions, Lily said. She's your daughter. Of course she has opinions. Our daughter. Our daughter. Alexander agreed, his hand moving to rest on Lily's stomach again. Who's going to have the best of both of us? And probably the worst. Definitely the worst. He pressed a kiss to Lily's temple. But we'll figure it out. Together. Together. Lily echoed. And for the first time since that night in a Westchester estate, since she'd woken up alone and pregnant and terrified, she believed it. Not because the danger was gone, not because their life was normal or safe, or anything resembling conventional, but because they'd built something stronger than fear. Something that had survived impossible odds and come out the other side not just intact, but thriving. They'd built a family. 3 weeks later, at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, Lily's water broke. Alexander drove her to the hospital with the kind of focused calm that only came from years of crisis management, even though his hands shook on the steering wheel. The birth was long, complicated, painful in ways Lily hadn't imagined possible. But when the doctor finally placed a tiny, screaming baby girl in her arms, Lily looked down at the red-faced, furious little human they'd created and felt her entire world reorganize itself around this one perfect moment. She's beautiful, Alexander whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She's perfect. Their daughter had dark hair like her father and what looked like her mother's nose. Her tiny fist wrapped around Alexander's finger with surprising strength, and she stopped crying immediately when she heard his voice. What do we call her? Lily asked, exhausted and euphoric and more in love than she'd thought possible. Alexander looked at her, then down at their daughter and smiled. Sophia. It means wisdom. Sophia Volkov. Lily tested the name, watching the way the baby's eyes, still that newborn blue that would change, seemed to focus on her voice. I like it. Sophia Ashford Volkov. Alexander corrected gently. She should have both of us. Lily felt tears spill over again. Happy tears this time. Yes. Sophia Ashford Volkov. They sat together in the hospital room as the sun rose over Manhattan, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, and let themselves believe that despite everything, Despite the violence and the secrets and the impossible beginning, they'd found something worth fighting for. Each other, their daughter, the life they'd built from a single reckless night. 5 years later, Sophia Ashford Volkov stood in her mother's gallery, hands on her hips, frowning at a painting with the kind of serious concentration that made visitors smile. "Mama, this one's crooked," she announced in the imperious tone of a 5-year-old who'd inherited her mother's eye for detail and her father's natural authority. Lily looked up from her desk, biting back a smile. "Is it?" "Yes. See?" Sophia pointed at the frame. "The left side is higher." She was right, of course. She usually was. "Good eye, sweetheart. Can you tell Mr. Harrison to adjust it?" Sophia marched over to the gallery assistant with perfect confidence, delivering her mother's instructions like a tiny CEO. Alexander appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed, watching their daughter with undisguised pride. "She's terrifying," he said. "She's 5. "Exactly. Imagine what she'll be like at 15. Lily stood, moving into his arms with the easy familiarity of 5 years together. "She'll be brilliant and stubborn and completely unmanageable. Like her mother. Like both her parents." Lily tilted her head back to look at him. "Are you complaining?" "Never." Alexander kissed her softly. "Though I am wondering if we're ready for round 2. Lily's hand moved unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "It's early. We weren't going to tell anyone yet." "I know. But Sophia keeps asking for a sibling, and I promised I'd never keep secrets from my family." "Smart man." "I learned from the best." His arms tightened around her. "Are you happy?" It was a question he asked regularly, like he still couldn't quite believe she'd stayed, that she'd chosen this life, that she loved him as fiercely as he loved her. Lily looked around her gallery, at the paintings she'd authenticated, the business she'd built, the life she'd created. Then at Sophia, who was now explaining to a bewildered client exactly why the Rothko in the corner was worth its asking price. And finally at Alexander, who'd transformed from a dangerous stranger into the man she trusted most in the world. "I'm happy," she said simply. "Are you?" "Every day?" He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Every single day." Sophia came running back, throwing herself at her father's legs. "Papa, the man wants to buy the big red painting, the expensive one." "The Rothko?" "Yes. I told him it was a good investment and that Mama's very smart about art, and he said okay." Alexander scooped her up, settling her on his hip despite her growing size. "Did you just close $1 million sale? Is that a lot?" "Very much." Sophia beamed. "Good. Mama says I get ice cream when I help with the business." "I said you get ice cream when you behave," Lily corrected, "and when you finish your vegetables." "I'm very good at behaving," Sophia said seriously. "Uncle Dmitri says I'm the best behaved child he knows." "Uncle Dmitri hasn't met very many children," Alexander murmured. Lily laughed, watching the two of them together, her husband and her daughter, both of them looking at her with identical expressions of love and mischief. This life hadn't been what she'd planned, hadn't been what she'd imagined during those early years building her business, establishing her reputation, crafting a careful existence. This life had been chaotic and dangerous, and born from a single reckless decision made in a shadowed alcove at a charity gala. But it was hers, theirs, and she wouldn't change a single moment. Well, maybe the part with the assassins, that she could have done without. But everything else, the fear and the love and the impossible choices that had brought them here, had been worth it. "Come on," she said, grabbing her coat. "Let's get our brilliant daughter some ice cream." "I want chocolate," Sophia announced. "You always want chocolate." "Because it's the best flavor, Mama. Obviously." Alexander caught Lily's eye over their daughter's head, his expression full of warmth and humor, and the kind of love that had survived everything the world had thrown at them. "I love you," he mouthed. "I know," she mouthed back. Because 5 years later, 5 years after a single night with a stranger had changed everything, she finally did know. Knew that what they had was real, hard-won, permanent. Knew that sometimes the best things in life came from the most impossible circumstances. Knew that love didn't always look like fairy tales. Sometimes it looked like survival, like choice, like building something beautiful from danger and fear and one reckless moment of connection. They left the gallery together, mother, father, daughter, and the secret they were still keeping about the child on the way, and stepped out into the Manhattan afternoon. Behind them, the gallery hummed with business and art and the legacy Lily had built. Ahead of them, a life full of chaos and love and whatever challenges came next. And between them, the unshakable knowledge that whatever happened, they'd face it together. Just like they'd faced everything else. One impossible moment at a time. The end.